Well, the Diddy trial, I think, to me, started faster than I thought it would, as far as, like, we heard he was going to get arrested, or he got arrested, and I guess there was some time, like, when is it going to start? But then it started, and it's basically over, like, closing arguments is kind of the state we're at right now.
It was much quicker than I anticipated it to be.
Yeah, and for me, it seems like less bombshells than I thought, because I think we just thought it was going to be like a celebrity trial.
Also, it became so commonplace to hear the bombshells that almost, as Jason likes to say, so I don't like to give credit, but is like desensitized. Like, oh my gosh, here's another
That's true.
bombshell from Diddy. And it's like, we just kind of got used to it.
We did. And so some developments recently, we're going to ask our official attorney, Lisa Lanier, based on what she has seen from the prosecution and defense, because they both have rested at this point, if she thinks that he's going to be found guilty or not guilty. I think there's some recent, they kind of dropped some charges at the last second, or like kidnapping, something else. We get into that. And then the strategy, perhaps with the defense not calling one witness on his behalf.
Which was kind of shocking.
I don't know if I've ever heard that before. Maybe it's more commonplace than we think. I don't know. And then, of course, Diddy did not take the stand. All right, let's go to our official attorney, Lisa Lanier. Good morning, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, this case is, it has gone by really quickly. It was really 29 days of testimony. It lasted 6 weeks, including pretrial motions, but 29 days of testimony, 30 prosecution witnesses. And, I think it's I'm going to tell you, I'm not being a wimp here. It is too close to call, but I will say that on the sex trafficking charges, I don't think it's tougher. That's going to be the hardest one. I think we're as likely to see a hung jury as we are to get a verdict. And on the sex trafficking charges, I think the consent was hit, the defense, like you said, risky strategy, not calling any witnesses. But what they did was they entered evidence instead. And what that evidence was they read text messages from the two key sex trafficking witnesses. And it was these lovey-dovey things, about how they loved him and wanted to please him. And it's clear from the text messages that these two women participated. Sometimes they would buy stuff for the freak-offs. Sometimes, and they would say in these text messages that they were looking forward to it or they liked it. One of the text messages they read was from Jane, and it said, I really like these freak-offs, or she called them hotel nights, when we both are into it. So, I mean, it's really, that's a tough thing for the prosecution to overcome. I do think they hit a home run on the transportation for the purposes of prostitution, but whether the jury will pick up on that, I don't know, because the problem, and this is what the prosecution was worried about when they started dropping some of the charges, the focus has been on the sex trafficking. And then I think it's sort of there's like a huge likelihood of juror confusion here. And that's what they're worried about. And so, they could think, well, there was consent for the sex trafficking, so we can't find him guilty of all these other things. But the Mann Act, MANN, makes it really clear that if you transport someone across state lines for the purpose of prostitution, you are guilty of that. And there was a ton of testimony, even from, I think, these escorts, that they, and certainly from the two victims, that these escorts were transported all over the place, and paid. The only question was, were they really being paid for sex versus entertainment? I don't think anybody questions that. I don't think there's any doubt that they were being paid for sex. So if the jury really followed that, then I think he ought to at least be convicted on those transportation for purposes of prostitution, Mann Act charges. But the sex trafficking itself, I don't know if the jury is going to be able to overcome the consent aspect of it. And, certainly people, experts in this area will tell you that using financial coercion, getting people sort of financially dependent on you, and then using that is essentially, that's what pimps do. They get women financially dependent or drug dependent, and then they make them prostitute themselves. But when you see it at this level, it's hard to relate it, because what you would normally see in a sex trafficking case is a pure quote unquote pimp situation, and here we just we see people having relationships, and I think that the defense did a good job of saying, look, this guy's not a good boyfriend. Was he violent? Yes. Did he have weird sexual taste? Yes. But does any of that make him a sex trafficker? No. And so I think that's where they're going to have the hardest time. The jury could be so overwhelmed by all of just sort of the butt nasty stuff they had to listen to and look at. That they may convict. You never know. Juries are incredibly unpredictable. That's why I think on the sex trafficking charge, it's really too close to call. And we could easily see a mistrial.
Go ahead, Katie.
Lisa, I was going to ask, one of the things, you were talking about how kind of relying on the fact that the jurors are going to be a little confused and led astray and try to figure stuff out. The most confusing thing to me in this trial so far has been the exposure of Diddy making sure that his baby oil was kept in a cigar humidor. Does anybody understand that? Because I don't get it.
I don't even know what a cigar humidor is.
Basically controlling the humidity. He was it was hidden in there, and I thought, why in there?
Yeah, why?
Why in there?
It's freaking weird.
Maybe he wants his baby oil just so,
Yes. And it was so
just
absurd.
The right temperature, just the right humidity. Yeah, I mean, that's weird, but absolutely. And, and they dropped the kidnapping and arson charges, which I thought were fairly strong as far as the testimony. I mean, the kidnapping, they took that woman into an abandoned building against her will and made her undergo lie detector tests over and over and over again because an expensive piece of jewelry had gone missing while she was in Diddy's house. And I thought, I mean, that's kidnapping.
Yeah. Do you think...
they dropped this because of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
I can see with the confusion part. Do you think, though, as a juror, when the judge explains, okay, they've dropped these charges, do you think the risk could be, the prosecution doesn't think their case is that strong in general? I don't know. It seemed like it. I mean, obviously these are talented people, but I don't know. It just seems, I don't know. I just felt like we thought it was going to be this
cut and dry,
all this. I thought there was going to be gun running charges, all these other different charges, and it seems like it's coming down to I don't know, maybe not. It didn't seem like it's as sensational as we thought it would be.
No. A lot of it, because we didn't have cameras in the courtroom, and a lot of what the jury saw was really sensational, I think. They actually saw footage, I think, from these freak-offs, and that was pretty awful. And I think that's, but they saw that, and they, there are illustrations of the jurors making these awful faces. And but I think that was the thing that kept the public insulated from that kind of wow factor about it, was that we just didn't get to see any of that. But to your point about the dropping the charges, they've tried to make it clear to the jury that they're doing that to streamline the jury instructions and to consolidate things versus it being a weakness in the case. So hopefully, because I think he, personally, my heart of hearts, I think he essentially was the same as a pimp with these women. I think he got them financially dependent on him, and then and used them, for his sexual pleasure as a prostitute would be used, and I think that's sex trafficking. But are they going to? Is the jury going to be able to see that over all these, especially those last text messages? What a way to end, with "I love you," and and saying I participated in these things and liked it.
Well, don't you also think that was like a defensive move for him, or maybe a protection move for him, basically, so that the women wouldn't expose him? That if he treated them, quote unquote, right, in the sense of, we'll take care of you and we're in a relationship, and really he's using and abusing them. But it was like, well, I'll say the right things. I'll do the right things. I'll get them addicted to the drugs, get them addicted to the sex, so that they also don't say. It's like blackmail, kind of.
Yeah, and and here's a weird thing along those lines. Jane, who testified against him, he still to this day is paying her rent and her legal bills.
Wow.
Oh my.
To this day.
That's wild.
Is that not crazy?
That is crazy.
And I don't know, is it still some kind of sick control weird thing that he thinks, I don't know why in the world he would still be paying her bills. That's just crazy to me.
Maybe it's out of guilt, maybe, but although it seems like he's a sociopath. And then you hear about all these celebrities at these freak-offs, and he filmed everything and recorded everything, and our understanding is they got all the evidence and nothing. There's nobody else that's been charged. Nobody else has been really implicated. No real huge stars were called to testify. I don't know. It's just, I mean,
well, and that's the
he
other
seems like
thing
a monster to me, and I hope he's found guilty. But if not, it's just another, power and celebrity wins out.
I don't know if the jury would know to ask this question, but in most RICO cases, you don't just have one defendant. You have the big boss, then you have the underbosses, you have like the chief underboss, and then all the other underbosses, and they all get charged. And here, he had an underboss. Her name was Christina Coram, and she was not charged. And we didn't hear from any of those people, really. And the Diddy employees that we did hear from, none of them really helped make out the case the way you would have expected, since the prosecution was the one calling them. But, they would basically say, like, yeah, he could be kind of mean sometimes, and he had some weird requests, but, man, he really helped me out, on these other things. And none of them really put like any kind of nail in the coffin on him, I didn't think. And that's odd. You would normally see, if you're going to call all these employees, there should be a smoking gun, and there's not.
And can you explain RICO to people?
Because I had to Google it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's essentially where you have a criminal enterprise, and you use, so like here, the idea is that he uses his record label and his fame and his notoriety and his money from that to carry on these criminal enterprises, prostitution. At one point, we thought we were going to hear gun charges, but we didn't. But that was something that was kind of early on talked about. Drug, all these ladies were really drugged up, and that's the other thing. Were they really enjoying this, or if you're all drugged up on 2 or 3 different substances, are you going to seem like you're enjoying it, or are you going to say you're enjoying it? I mean, 'cause that's actually one of the things they do with prostitutes, so that they don't seem like they're horrified at what's going on, is they drug them up, so that they seem happy.
Wow. All right, so we'll see. So I guess we'll probably know next week, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the longer it goes on, usually that means they're really struggling, and you may see a hung jury for sure. I mean, that's a real possibility here, because there's just a lot to be confused about here.
And then a hung jury, you can set a new trial, or they can decide not to continue the prosecution. Yeah,
it'd be up to the prosecution. Yeah, the prosecution could decide whether or not to retry him. And I don't know, they often do, but here it's tough. I mean, they may have to take a lesson or two from this and really regroup about it.
Okay. Thank you for really explaining that. I feel like we're much clearer about all the possibilities. As always, Lisa, thank you. Official attorney of Jared and Katie in the Morning. If you're ever injured, contact her right away at hireaheavyweight.com.